Before taking this class, I naively viewed healthcare and medicine as inherently good and helpful to all individuals. My eyes have been opened to the ways in which medicine has often done the opposite. It has exploited certain groups and continues to do so today. Medical experimentation and exploitation of African Americans throughout history shows how medicine may help some people, but also has the potential to harm vulnerable populations. One episode in this history of exploitation occurred in the 19th century at the hands of James Marion Sims. Lucy, Anarcha, and Betsy, along with 11 other female slaves whose names remain unknown, were subject to James Marion Sims' experimentation. Sims performed over 30 operations on Anarcha alone, all without anesthesia. These women were also unable to give their own consent because physicians were required to follow the slave owner's wishes rather than the slaves'. Sims perfected his surgical repair of vesicovaginal fistulas, a painful condition resulting from childbirth, and went on to use his perfected methods on white women with anesthesia. Harriet Washington explains the perspective used to justify this differential treatment, saying white physicians viewed black bodies as subjects rather than as patients. To view one as a patient is to imply equality between patient and physician, whereas to view one as a subject is to imply inferiority of the patient. This perspective was specifically applied to African Americans in the form of scientific racism. This view of black bodies as subjects rather than patients continued into the 20th century. In the 1950s, doctors at the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland, took Henrietta Lacks's cells without her consent, after she died from cervical cancer. Her cells were then replicated and used for medical gain. They enabled scientist Jonas Salk to develop a polio vaccine, are used for gene mapping, and reveal the effects of radiation on humans. While the medical world benefited from Henrietta Lacks's cells, her family received no compensation and lived in poverty, unable to access medical care themselves. Once again, medicine exploited African American bodies in order to benefit others. Even more recently, ancestry programs such as 23andMe specifically target African Americans for their DNA, tapping into a cultural desire to know one's ancestry before slavery. While consent is given through lengthy terms and conditions agreements, 23andMe does not divulge what their true purpose is for obtaining this DNA. Many African Americans will give their DNA without full knowledge of what will be done with it. Right now, they would not be able to consent to any given research experimentation. To someone who is unaware of our nation's complete medical history, these events may seem like isolated incidents. However, these incidents of medical abuse reflect a much broader history of harm. I now see medicine as an institution that claims to help all people, but exhibits a tendency to exploit vulnerable populations. As someone who desires to be a medical practitioner, I am now aware of why one might be skeptical towards medicine. If medical professionals are not aware of this pattern of exploitation of African Americans, they will lack an ability to empathize with their patients and therefore will not be able to provide the best care. Medicine must be adapted to help all people, including and especially vulnerable populations.